Joe didn't think today would be the day. It started like any other morning. Alarm, coffee, phone in hand. He scrolled through headlines while buttering toast. Gas prices up again, rent climbing in major cities. Another article about credit card debt hitting record highs. He sighed. Then his car made a sound it had never made before. A soft, grinding noise. Nothing dramatic, just wrong. Joe turned up the radio and told himself it was fine. That's how most financial emergencies start, quietly, not with explosions, with denial. By lunchtime, the check engine light was on. Joe pulled into a parking lot and stared at the dashboard. He sat there longer than he needed to, running numbers in his head. If it's minor, maybe $200. If it's bad, he didn't finish that thought. Because deep down, Joe already knew. He was one emergency away from broke. And so are millions of people watching this right now. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes to talk about. Most adults in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia don't have enough savings to cover a surprise expense. Not a vacation, not a new phone, a basic emergency. A broken car, a medical bill, a rent increase. Just one. That's all it takes. Joe walked into the repair shop trying to look calm. The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and rubber tires. A small TV played a daytime talk show nobody was watching. He sat next to a woman holding a toddler. Across from him, a man in a delivery uniform stared at his phone. Nobody spoke. Everyone was waiting for a number that could change their month, maybe their year. The mechanic finally called Joe's name. He pointed at a greasy tablet screen. Transmission issue. Not catastrophic, but not cheap. About $1,400, the mechanic said. Joe nodded. He didn't react. He just nodded. That's what people do when their nervous system freezes. Joe walked back to his car, closed the door, and just sat. He opened his banking app. Checking account, $612. Savings, $438. Credit card available, $2,100. He did the math. He always does the math. Then he stared at the steering wheel. This wasn't supposed to happen. Joe works. Joe pays his bills. Joe doesn't buy designer clothes. Joe brings lunch from home. Joe did everything right. So why did one broken part feel like a financial punch to the chest? Because modern life is balanced on a thin wire, and most people don't realize how high they are until they slip. Let's zoom out for a moment. Joe isn't bad with money. He doesn't gamble. He doesn't party every weekend. He doesn't own a boat. He just lives in a world where expenses rise faster than paychecks, where housing eats half your income, where groceries quietly creep up every month, where subscriptions drain accounts invisibly, where one missed paycheck becomes a crisis. This didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, so slowly that most people didn't notice. 20 years ago, emergencies were setbacks. Now they're cliff edges. Joe put the repair on his credit card. He told himself he'd figure it out later. Everyone tells themselves that. That night, Joe skipped dinner, not because he couldn't afford it, but because his stomach was tight. He lay in bed scrolling. A couple on Instagram announcing their engagement, a friend posting vacation photos, someone flexing a new car. Everyone looked fine. Everyone looked ahead. Joe stared at the ceiling. He felt behind. But here's what Joe couldn't see. Neither could you. Most of those people are one emergency away, too. They just don't post that part. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because financial fragility isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hides behind normal jobs, normal clothes, normal smiles. Joe fell asleep thinking about minimum payments.
The next morning, Joe woke up tired, not physically, mentally. That heavy tired that comes from uncertainty. He made coffee and opened his budgeting app. He scrolled through transactions, rent, utilities, phone bill, streaming subscriptions, groceries, gas. Everything looked small on its own. Together, they formed a wall. Joe tried something new. He listed every fixed expense, then every flexible one. Then he stared. There wasn't much room. That's when it hit him. He wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. He was living emergency to emergency. There's a difference. Paycheck to paycheck means you barely make it to the next deposit. Emergency to emergency means you're stable until life happens. Most people fall into that second category. They appear okay. They're functioning. They're surviving. But underneath, they're financially brittle, like glass, strong until pressure hits. Joe remembered something his dad once told him. "When I was your age, we bought this house on one income." Joe pays more in rent now than his parents paid for their mortgage, adjusted for inflation. That comparison sat heavy. Joe started replaying his 20s, student loans, entry-level pay, rising rents. He never had a moment where money felt safe, just moments where it felt less scary. This is the psychological trap. You normalize struggle. You adapt. You shrink your expectations. You tell yourself it's temporary. Then years pass. By Friday, Joe was back at work, smiling at coworkers, answering emails. Nobody knew his transmission had broken. Nobody knew his savings were gone. Nobody knew his credit card balance just jumped. Because that's how financial stress works. It's invisible, but it changes how you move. Joe stopped ordering coffee. He declined a friend's dinner invite. He delayed buying new shoes. Tiny decisions, silent sacrifices. And here's the cruel part. Emergencies don't arrive one at a time. They stack. The car breaks, then rent increases, then your phone dies, then your hours get cut. Life doesn't wait for you to recover. Joe started Googling things late at night. How much should I have in savings? What percentage of Americans live paycheck to paycheck? Why does everything feel harder now? The answers weren't comforting. In the U.S. alone, tens of millions can't cover a $1,000 surprise. In the UK, nearly half of adults report low financial resilience. Canada and Australia tell similar stories. Different accents, same stress. Joe realized something important. He wasn't failing. He was participating in an economy where safety nets are thin and costs are thick. The system rewards optimization, but punishes vulnerability. Joe thought about all the things that could happen. A medical bill, a layoff, a family emergency. He imagined dominoes. One push, everything tipping. That's when anxiety becomes background noise, not panic, just a constant hum. Joe started carrying that hum everywhere, into meetings, into grocery aisles, into sleep. 2 months later, Joe was still paying off the repair, slowly, carefully. He built his savings back to $300, then $500. Progress felt fragile, like stacking cards. One afternoon, Joe sat on a park bench during lunch. He watched kids chasing pigeons. He watched an elderly couple share a sandwich. He watched people living their lives. He wondered how many of them were quietly calculating too. Here's the part nobody teaches you. Financial stress doesn't just affect your bank account. It changes your personality. You become more cautious, more tired, less spontaneous. You start thinking in trade-offs instead of dreams. Joe used to talk about travel. Now he talks about interest rates. He used to plan weekends. Now he plans payments. This is what being one emergency away from broke really means. It means your future gets smaller. And Joe isn't alone. This is happening to teachers, delivery drivers, office workers, nurses, freelancers, people who did what they were told, go to school, get a job, work hard, yet somehow stability keeps slipping further away. But here's the quiet realization Joe eventually reached. He stopped blaming himself. He started seeing the pattern: rising costs, stagnant wages, debt normalized, savings treated like a luxury. Joe didn't suddenly become rich. Nothing magical happened, but something shifted. He became aware that this system is designed to keep people reactive, always catching up, never getting ahead. Joe still budgets, he still worries, but now he understands the game he's inside. And maybe that's the real story, not the broken car, not the $1,400 repair, but the invisible pressure millions of average Joes live under every day, smiling, working, scrolling,
hoping nothing breaks next, because when you're one emergency away from broke, you don't feel poor, you feel temporary. And if this story feels familiar, if you saw yourself in Joe, you're not weak, you're human, living inside a fragile economy, trying to stay upright on a moving floor. Joe stood up from the park bench and went back to work. Tomorrow would come, bills would arrive, life would continue. But now, Joe knows something most people don't realize until it happens. Stability isn't guaranteed, it's negotiated, every month. And sometimes, all it takes is one quiet grinding noise.
If this story hit close to home, give it a thumbs up. It helps more than you think. Let me know in the comments which part felt most relatable. I read every one of your comments. And if you want more real money stories like this, subscribe to Average Joe Invests and share this with someone who might need it today.